Hey guys, what's going on? Insidious Swede back again here for another YouTube video, and today I want to talk about 10 comics that I would want to recommend to people looking to get into the medium. Now, before I get into the actual series, there are a few things that I want to talk about first. To start off with, I do understand and recognize that at least 90 to 95% of my subscriber base is obviously here for manga related content, but I'm here today to tell you that if you're watching this video and are part of that majority, please give comics a shot, and vice versa. If you're here looking to get into comics, then there is no reason why you shouldn't look into getting into manga as well. I have a lot of videos up talking about underrated titles, amazing series, stuff like that, so definitely feel free to head over to other videos on my channel. I understand that these videos get more traffic than your general discussion video or volume review video, kind of stuff like that. So if you're curious about comics or manga and or both, then I would recommend looking into getting into both of the series. I never understand why people only do one or the other, because in many ways they're so very close that it wouldn't make sense to not try out at least a couple things. So I'm here today to give you guys 10 titles that I'd want to recommend to people who are looking to get into comics. So let's get into the actual video. Now, let's start off with a pretty heavy hitter. This is a series I wanted to talk about first because there's a pretty great story behind it with myself, but the first title that I'd recommend to basically anybody, regardless if they were even looking to get into comics, is Y: The Last Man. Now, I have since sold off my trades of this title, so as you can see here, I do have the Absolute Edition to it, but this thing is absolutely massive, as you can see here. And I bought this because I love the series to death. Y: The Last Man is what Death Note was to me and for manga. It was my gateway drug into comics. This series is about Yorick Brown, who is the last man on planet Earth. Now, we don't know why this happened or how it happened, but Yorick Brown is the only man who managed to survive the end of days for males, and so it's a series basically following him, a few other women who are trying to help him find out about what exactly happened, how this all went down. And like I said, this again was my gateway drug into comics. Before reading Y: The Last Man, there were a few other comics I read, superhero based, and honestly, I couldn't get into them, and I was about ready to almost give up on comics because I just thought they weren't for me. But Y: The Last Man, and I can't remember what turned me on to this series, but after reading this series, again, just like with Death Note, I couldn't put it down. It was amazing. I loved every single second of it. The ending was brilliant. Everything about this series is freaking incredible. Also, a lot of great comedy in here as well. Just an amazing series from start to finish, and honestly, if you're gonna check out any title in this video, Y: The Last Man is as good of a place to start as any because of the amazing writing, beautiful artwork, and again, overall, very cohesive title and story and plot with an amazing ending, and just overall, a very solid title. So yeah, I have to recommend this title right off the bat, but I'm sure most of you have at least heard of this series, so I want to go to a few other ones as well, of course. Some that either you may not have heard of or just haven't had that extra nudge to just give a shot. So the next title I want to recommend for people looking to get into comics is Deadly Class. Now, this is by Rick Remender, who's a very big name in the industry, obviously. He's done so many amazing titles over the years, but in my opinion, even beyond a series like Black Science, which is another very famous work of his, I think Deadly Class is the best thing he's done. It's essentially about a group of assassins who are all going to school together, and they learn how to kill, essentially, but our character we follow is not quite so one-dimensional. He has a very interesting past. He has a very interesting story. So does a lot of the, you know, figureheads at this school as well. A lot of mystery shrouding them. And it's just an amazing series about a bunch of young kids who happen to be professional killers as well. Even have the same old cliques here in this series as you do in any other high school, with just a lot of great dialogue and commentary. I'm also a pretty big fan of the artwork in here. I love the way this series is drawn. Everything about this title has blown me away. I do have that really oversized edition. Again, there's a name for it that I'm blanking on at the time, but it's a massive book, about the same size as the Absolute editions, but I still have my first trade, so I'm using that to show it off today for the video because it's a lot easier to get on frame. But yeah, Deadly Class is an amazing series that I know is getting a lot of praise, but I still feel that there's plenty of people out there who haven't even heard of the title. So if you're looking for a great comic, definitely look at Deadly Class as an option because it has everything you could possibly want in a good series. Alright, next title. This is going to be the only superhero book on this list, and it's a bit of an obligatory you know, pick because I'm sure most of you have heard of it and have probably read it, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But that is Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder's Batman from the New 52. It's one of the few superhero titles that I can say without a shadow of a doubt I loved. This series from start to finish, basically, I was just enamored by the way it was drawn. The writing behind the series is absolutely brilliant. And the best thing about the New 52, which for me as a, you know, newer comic book fan, I've only been reading about comics for 4 or 5 years at this point. It's just a series that's so easy to get into. The characters aren't hard to follow, but yet you're getting amazing stories. Now, personally, my favorite part of the entire you know, New 52 Batman was probably, and not a popular pick either, but was the 0 Year. I think it went on for 2 volumes, around like 4 and 5. I absolutely loved 0 Year with the Riddler. This Court of the Owls is also fantastic as well, but you know, from start to finish, from issue 1 to 50 or volumes, you know, 1 to 7 or whatever it was, I loved Batman from Snyder and Capullo. So if you are somebody looking to get into superhero comics, Rebirth is out now, which is a good place to start. But if you don't want to get into an ongoing title, then New 52 Batman is a perfect place to start. Alright, next series up, and well, I say there is no more superhero titles, yet here I have another one. Actually, I kind of forgot that this one was next, but I guess it's technically not a true superhero title, and it's one that I don't like because of the fact it has superheroes in it, but because of how it's written. But that is Invincible. Now, this title, of course, is put out by Image, so not part of your standard Marvel or DC superhero comic, but I absolutely love this series. It's about Mark Grayson, the kid down here in the yellow and blue suit. And I just love the character dynamic between himself and his father. Essentially, you know, I won't get into it too much, but his father is an alien from another planet who came to Earth and basically became this universe's Superman. He saved tons of lives and did so much good. And now Mark Grayson, as his son being part, you know, alien, part human, is slowly gaining the powers of his father and wants to join him in the fight to be a superhero. There's also some great, you know, relationship stuff in here and romance, along with a lot of other amazing side characters that have so much backstory to them, so much fleshed out. And there's, again, such an amazing dynamic between the father and the son that really takes this title over the top, and it's a bit darker than you'd expect as well. There's actually plenty of violence in here. It starts off a bit of a standard kind of all ages superhero title, but once you get through about the first half of Volume 1 and definitely into Volume 2, you can definitely tell there's a tone shift where the series goes from being all ages to more of a teen plus kind of title. And personally, I just love it. The series, again, is phenomenal. It's one of the best comics I've ever read. So if you haven't read Invincible and again are also craving that kind of superhero element that comics bring, then this series is definitely one to check out. Alright, next series up. Now, this one, to anybody who is familiar with my channel, is not going to be surprised that I'm having it on this video. It is my favorite comic of all time, and it is also the only series that I've ever done 2 video reviews for it. One that I wasn't too happy with, so of course I came back and made a second one that I'm a bit more happy with, obviously. But it is, again, the best comic I've ever read. It is Postal by Matt Hawkins and Bryan Hill. This series is perfection. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It is a series about a guy named Mark Schifrin. He's a postal worker in a small town called Eden, Wyoming, and he has Asperger's. And it's an interesting kind of detective mystery thriller about himself, his mother right here, also his father, who's been out of the picture for years, and kind of a whole kind of mystery slash, you know, detective crime series that really blew me away from chapter 1, or issue 1 rather. Mark Schifrin is one of the most interesting main characters I have ever seen in a story because he is so different, so unique. He just is very interesting to read and experience, and he's very, I don't know how else to describe it, he's kind of emotionless, but he's not. He kind of goes about his life in a very calculated kind of manner, where it kind of leaves him to be very kind of cool and collected, so he never gets too up or down about anything. But through the chapters, through the volumes, you can notice this slight and subtle change in Mark that is just so fascinating to watch. And I will mention now, Matt Hawkins does start writing Postal from Volume 1 and Volume 2, and then I believe in Volume 3, Bryan Hill takes over, and I gotta say, Bryan has been doing an amazing job with this title, and honestly, in my opinion, elevating it to even better heights. So if you haven't read Postal yet, please give it a shot. I will link my graphic novel review in the description if you want to hear more about this series, but overall, I love it to death. It's a series that needs to be picked up by everyone, and is honestly an amazing place to start for a new comic book reader, because it's a smart series. It doesn't necessarily feel like you're reading a comic book, which is another amazing aspect or trait to this series. So definitely check out Postal if you haven't yet. Next title up, here's a Image series that I love that doesn't get enough recognition now. This is done by Joshua Williamson, who also does Nailbiter, which is an amazing series, but I decided to talk about Birthright today. This is another title by him who, Joshua Williamson, is quickly becoming one of my favorite writers in the industry. But this is an interesting series about a kid who gets lost in the woods at a young age, and turns out he was able to find his way to a new world where he essentially grew up and became a warrior there, fighting a war. He was, picked as the savior of this universe, but has come back now kind of as a failure. And it's a very interesting series to see this guy go between, being a hero to reuniting with his family, to introducing characters that have kind of crossed over in this whole battle that's, crossing different dimensions and worlds again. So if you haven't read Birthright, it's an amazing series. I did say this before, it is a bit slow, but that's because I originally read this title in single issues. It reads 10 times better in trades, so I think there's 4 or 5 trades out currently, so it's definitely going to read a lot better and a lot faster at a better pace if you read it in trade, which I wish I did. It's why I don't buy single issues anymore, because of the pace and how little you get from month to month. But yeah, Birthright is amazing, guys, so if you haven't read it yet, definitely give it a shot. And also Nailbiter, by the way, let's not leave it out, so kind of a throw-in, and that's not even Nailbiter. Nailbiter, kind of a throw-in again, an amazing series here about serial killers in a small town of Buckaroo, Oregon. Another amazing title that you could not go wrong with either, but I decided to recommend Birthright for this video. Alright, next title up is one that I absolutely love. It's a series that just got a brand new release, so it's even better to recommend it now more than ever, but that is Brian Wood's Northlanders. Now, I will admit I'm kind of biased when it comes to Viking series. I do love the Time of Vikings. I'm a huge fan of course, Vinland Saga, the amazing shows that are out right now revolving around the Viking, lore and whatnot. So I guess Northlanders kind of scratches that itch for me, but I do think it's Brian Wood's best work. It's just an amazing series that you really kind of have to read and appreciate for itself. It's a very brutal title, as you can see. I'm assuming intended for mature audiences here, but it's just a very interesting title about very unique characters in this world of Vikings that I absolutely love. It's a title that I don't want to get into now. I do have plans to make a video on it in the future, but it's just one of those series that I wasn't expecting to like, and I ended up loving it. So definitely check this one out again if you're a fan of Vikings like I am, if you're a fan of, mythology and whatnot, and just an amazing and compelling story with a lot of very brutal violence, but done in a very interesting and unique kind of manner. So Northlanders is definitely a title I'd recommend, especially considering that I'm sure a lot of you haven't even heard of this series. So definitely feel free to check out Volume 1 of Brian Wood's Northlanders. I don't think you'll be disappointed because it's an absolutely brilliant read. So that's next. What is that? Number 8 on this list. So getting into number 9, this is actually a newer title. It only has the single volume out right now, but it was so good there was no way I wasn't going to recommend it, and that is Kill or Be Killed by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. This first volume had everything you could want. It's kind of a weird kind of story. It's about a guy who doesn't really know what to do with his life. The girl he's in love with is dating his roommate, and he kind of turns into this Punisher kind of character, but it happens in such an interesting manner. He's trying to figure out if he's killing these people because he's crazy, or if because there's actually this external force that's kind of, forcing him to make these decisions. And it's a very interesting look into right and wrong. Just the way that the character is depicted and the struggle that he goes through simply this first volume is absolutely amazing. I've said this before in I think it was my last graphic novel collection video, but this was one of the best first volumes I have ever read to a series. I loved the characters, I loved the world setting, I loved the kind of fiction that's thrown in there with this whole realistic take on a guy that's going kind of crazy. Just an amazing series. If you haven't read Kill or Be Killed yet, I would strongly recommend checking it out. Unfortunately though, again, only the first trade is out, but there's more coming out soon, and it's just been brilliant so far. There's no reason not to give it a shot, despite its length. And the last series I want to recommend to people is High Crimes. This is done by Christopher Sebela, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, and Ibrahim Mustafa. Now, I actually checked out this title because of one reason. I saw an interview, I think from Back to the Gutters, the YouTube channel. They did an interview with Ibrahim Mustafa. I'll put a link for that in the description as well if you're curious. But yeah, I saw his process and how he went about drawing, and I loved his style and the way that he drew and his artistic take. And they talked about High Crimes in that series, kind of like a self-promotion deal, and I was intrigued enough to check it out. Luckily, Dark Horse did pick up this title and put out a hardcover for it, because originally it was published in a digital format only. But it's an amazing series that kind of covers a woman who essentially collects dead bodies from Everest and kind of sells them back to the families, because of course many people die while trekking up this mountain, and normally the bodies go undetected and undiscovered, so it's their job to get the bodies back, of course, for a hefty sum, but still bring these people back to their families. But there's an interesting kind of group that they get involved with because of one of the people they dig out from the snow and the ice that ends up being somebody they should have probably left buried. And it's just an amazing story about her journey, and it's so well done. I love the artwork in this title. It looks phenomenal. A beautifully drawn series with amazing writing, again, by Christopher Sebela. So if you haven't read High Crimes yet, again, it's another one of those titles that I'm sure most of you haven't heard of. If you want to hear a more in-depth analysis, I'll link that interview again down below. But just a phenomenal title that I gave it a shot on that video, but I ended up becoming just enamored by it and loved the series to death. So definitely give High Crimes a shot. And yeah, those are 10 titles that I'd recommend to anybody looking to get into comics again. If you're a fan of comics or looking for new things to read, also check out manga. It's an amazing medium that I love to death. It'll always be my primary form of entertainment. But hopefully this video did give you some insight to other comics that you haven't read before and are maybe looking to give a shot. But anyways, guys, thank you for watching. I am Insidious Swede, and until next time, take care.